Today we are talking with the incredible David Coulthard, known for his outstanding F1 career with 13 Grand Prix wins and a smooth transition to broadcasting and business. David's journey started in a family deep-rooted in business and in motorsport. We'll talk about his early days and how his family shaped his career, his efforts to support female drivers, and the lessons that he learned through motorsports. David's story also includes surviving a plane crash and multiple high-speed accidents, which have given him a really unique perspective on life and building resilience. After the track, he co-founded 2 companies and formed successful partnerships with Red Bull, Heineken, and Wings for Life. We'll dive into how high-performance sport helps to build teams and scale businesses. Get ready for an inspiring conversation. Enjoy. The family business, Hayton Coulthard Transport, has been running since 1916. And going back to the early days, your family always had a very strong tie to motorsport and to business. Can you talk a little bit about how that environment shaped you growing up?
Well, I grew up in a small village in the southwest of Scotland, 30 miles from Dumfries. A little village was called Twynham, and I think there was about 350 people there when I grew up. And that's where the yard was. That's where the transport office was, and what was, at the time, I believe, when it was built, one of the biggest freestanding warehouses in Europe, never mind Britain. So my great-grandfather had great vision for, building that business and seeing beyond the sort of local dairy type business as it started out, taking milk from the farms and bringing it to the local creamery. And I grew up with a father who loved motorsport, a mother who loved my father, and they were quite a team, the two of them together, when it came to sort of building the business. They recognized the importance of whoever it was you were dealing with, building personal relationships with them and their families. And I think that's something that in this modern world of, hey, we'll just FaceTime and we'll just catch up online, it's fine for some things. But if you're actually looking for sustained relationships and to have someone that's got your back when things get difficult, because everybody loves a winner. We see it in sport. Everyone's there cheering when, the champagne's been sprayed, but you really find out who's with you in difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's no bad time spent building those relationships. And you just never know when that comes to support you in life. So yeah, absolutely agree. And what kind of rules and routines did you have growing up? And have you emulated those with your son as he's got older? I'm always interested in the boundaries.
Yeah, I think I'm not doing such a good job at instilling in him the same sort of cleanliness and organizational skills that my mum and dad instilled in me. It's a different generation thing, isn't it? It's, in my childhood, I have an older brother and I had a younger sister, and it was all hands on deck in the household. Everyone was expected to muck in and do all the sort of chores and help out. And it's a different lifestyle we have today. I live in Monaco. I'm no longer with my son's mother, and therefore that brings another sort of area that when it becomes you've got two managers rather than one united manager, which is what my parents were. So he is a curious one, because my son's very sort of particular about his presentation and his hair and all the sort of stuff that I would have been fussy about. But then his traveling suitcase will look like he's literally tied everything in a knot when he's put it in there fresh from the drawers. And I don't get that, because I was a lot more organized. And people might wonder, why is that important? And I think everything's important. Everything that you look at, everything you touch, everything you see in your life is all part of a work ethic and a vision for how you prepare for your work or for your relationships. The kart track I was at yesterday, which I've got to say was a track I hadn't been at for 30 years. The great thing about him racing karts in the UK is I get to go back to my childhood. But anyway, this track was very nicely presented, considering it must be 40 odd years old. But then you get the classic thing where the younger generation will drop their ice cream, cups and crisp packets and bottles of juice. And I spend my time in between races going around picking up litter. And I just don't get it. I don't get the attitude. I can't walk past anything if something falls over in the house and I see it's fallen over, I have to go and pick it up, even if it's another room, because anything less than 100% is just cheating yourself and cheating the attitude you have for going about your business.
Yeah, really, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that absolutely speaks to that. Do you think that's something that you learned growing up, like as a teenager, were you just like that? Because I know myself, I've definitely matured in my approach to, say, organisation. I don't know if I had that as a teenager, but I'm extremely organised now as an adult and mum of 3 kids. But I don't know if I could say my teenage self was as organised.
I think I definitely had that at an early age. I'm not sure my older brother was as tidy, although I consider him a very sort of tidy and organised businessman now. I guess we're all different, aren't we? And I being the middle child, I wanted to go racing. We were all given opportunities. 11 years old, I started racing, but before that, we were going to kart races in a motorhome. You know, I grew up in this travelling lifestyle with maybe 8 people sleeping in a small confined space, and you had to be tidy and you had to be organised. And it was also my job to clean it all afterwards. So I always say I've done more toilet duty than most people have probably been in a toilet. But again, it's just an attitude that I think you take through your life. You know, I'm 53, and I say I had no problem picking up other people's crap at the weekend and in between events, just tidying the trailer and cleaning things, because it takes only this. It does not take an intelligent person with a degree to be organised and tidy, but someone that can't see mess, what else can't they see? Yeah,
I think that's a really good point. And it just makes you have a tidy mind. I think when everything's organised, you feel good. Okay, we can start whatever we're doing. So you mentioned your son has got into karting. Is that something that you encouraged him to start, or do you think it was part of the environment? And do you see the risk a little bit differently now it's your son behind the wheel?
Yeah, I didn't encourage him into karting. He was a little bit later than what would have been the case had I done so. It was just something that a little fun kart that he wanted to go and play in as a young kid. And that progressed to the point where he decided he wanted to race. And it was amazing, actually, because I recall I was always very nervous about going racing. You know, it really mattered, and I was nervous, and I really wanted to do well. And I look at my son. He turns up on time. He seems pretty confident. Win or lose, he's fairly chilled. He never looks nervous. And I'm thinking, I'm nervous watching him because something can happen. So I don't know, again, if it's this younger generation where they're just so, let's say, worldly, that they've seen virtually so many things that they're not as fearful. You know, again, being a village boy, I truly think that was an advantage to me, because I didn't know so much, and I knew I didn't know so much, and therefore I just kept my distance from those more educated or more worldly people that probably would have just taken my time and been a distraction. You know, we were a tight little racing team, and to that end, Dave Boyce, who looked after me in karting, he's in his 70s now, looks after my son, because it's the same environment, it's the same advice. Obviously, Dave's older, but he's got even more experience. And I think it worked out pretty well for me. And therefore, I don't see why it would be a bad thing for my son, whether he goes on to race professionally or not. But I just think the grounding of there's many ways to do something right, but there's usually only one right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so refreshing to see him come in with the confidence and still have the discipline and all of the things that you need to do, but he will do it slightly different too. And what a special thing to be able to share together and have that experience. And he'll learn from you, but I bet you learn a lot from him and his style as he evolves through the sport. So moving on to your sister Lindsay, sadly, who died in 2013. I heard you speak about her as a more naturally gifted driver, but the infrastructure just wasn't there to push her through. And I've heard you speak about how you're championing drivers, female drivers, to get that Lewis Hamilton treatment. Can you speak a little bit to that and how you see that changing?
Well, as I say, I've got an older brother, 3 years older. Lindsay was 6 years younger. So by the time I was on the cusp of moving into cars at 17, then she'd been racing since 8. But it was really in, it was that sort of formative early years. And where it seems to be that girls and boys actually have that sort of crunch point, that point of do they have the hunger, desire to push through in towards cars or not, is in the sort of the puberty years. So going from young boys and girls into young men and women. And I think historically there's been so few role model females that I guess a lot of the families or a lot of the women have thought, well, this has been fun, but there doesn't seem to be an example of how this can be a career. And then they stop doing it. Of course, there's been the occasional one that has had reasonable success. But in elite sport, reasonable is not what we're looking for. We're looking for exceptional. And the great sportsmen and women of the world that we can mention have risen to the top against thousands, tens of thousands, probably, depending on their sport, and stood out because they've had talent, they've had work ethic, they've had opportunity and all that sort of good stuff. So when I went into cars and Jackie Stewart signed me up to his son's team called Paul Stewart Racing, it all seemed like it was becoming real. It felt like it was becoming a potential career, where before I only ever looked at karting as a hobby. It was just a brilliant thing to do, and I enjoyed winning races, and I enjoyed that whole journey. But I thought I'd work in the family transport business, not as a truck driver, because I wouldn't have had the patience for that. But I thought I'd be on the business side, the office, dealing with customers and things like that. But as it happened, I was reasonably good in the early stages of my car racing. And that meant that career became more of a reality. And the more that becomes a reality, the less time the family have to go racing with Lindsay, the more she's coming to my races. And slowly but surely, her opportunity kind of disappeared. Because if you're not giving 100% commitment, somebody else will. And therefore, of course, the outcome's going to be as you would expect. And so Lindsay was always with me at many of my events. She had her own personal challenges. She dealt with depression and, she had weight issues. And she was a bright, intelligent woman who I enjoyed spending time with. She came to a lot of my events, and never once did she ever complain that I could have been, on this track had it not been for all the attention going on yourself. And so I always, I loved her, obviously, and then I loved her even more for her selflessness, to be on this journey as a family. And even my brother, who had no interest in racing, when I was in Formula One, would come to a number of the races. It was a family thing we all did at the beginning, and it was a family thing that we did when it became a professional career. And Lindsay was there, always on that journey. And sadly, she's not with us, but prior to her death, she had got married, had a child, and had been as happy as I'd ever seen her in her life journey. And it was just cut short. So in her memory, I want to make sure that any other young girls out there that got a chance or got a talent will be given the full grounding of advice to try and help support them. This is not a foundation of a pot of cash that's just going to scatterbomb out here. Everybody turn up, you'll get a cart and off you go. They already have to have, as a family, found their way into the racing scene, found their early legs of performance, and then we'll evaluate whether it looks like they've got that little spark. And if they have, they'll get the support. And if they haven't, sadly, like everything in life, there will no longer be support, because you cannot manufacture a miracle, to use a Robbie Williams line from one of his songs. You've got to have that desire and hunger and talent and need, all of the things that will separate you from the others.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I think having that focused family, read recently that really so difficult in families when it's almost like a child-focused family or a parent-focused family, and actually doing those things as a family and deciding as a family unit and having that base level of support is how we build that next generation of female drivers. And something that I'd read about recently is the Charlotte Tilbury sponsorship of the F1 Academy, which is amazing to see. I'd read that there was 40% of F1 fans are female, but actually only 7% end up being drivers. And she's come in as a huge fan and was something that she'd always done with her dad, and these incredible cars and makeup touches. And it just looks like something that is really going to draw women in. And exactly as you say, you need the role models, and that comes with the brands as well. You need the brands that you think, oh, I identify with that, and that brings me in, and yeah, I can actually see myself there. So it is building that whole ecosystem. Is there anything else you think that will help improve that visibility for women in the sport, specific things that maybe you're seeing?
Well, I was at a kart track yesterday in the Cotswolds, and there was a lot of young girls that were racing, which for me is just really encouraging. When I grew up, there was maybe one. Really, it was just boys that were doing it, and I think that I think it's just changing over time. I think families, if their daughters are interested, little speed demons on their bicycles, getting the stabilizers off early. There's always the early signs, isn't there? Some boys are cut out to want to be speed demons, and some girls are, and some boys are very timid and more thoughtful and reflect. They're not. That's not their thing. So I think that you can't force somebody to enjoy something. You can create opportunity, but once you see they enjoy it, it really is really truly explaining what the steps are in terms of, it's not just jumping into driving. You've got to think about it, visualize it, prepare for it, live it. It's got to be all encompassing, because again, if it isn't for you and someone else has the same talent in the world and it is for them, who do we think is going to make less mistakes or be more focused or be more prepared? The one that just prepares, that thinks about it.
Absolutely.
So in many ways, it's so simple. It's so simple. And I think that one of the reasons why a few of my generation of Scots came through, Alan McNish, a couple of years older than me, he raced in Le Mans many times, multiple winner, raced in Formula One, Dario Franchitti, tested Formula One, raced in America with great success. A couple of years younger than me. We were a generation of grafters. We were pre-internet, pre-distractions. During the week was preparing to go racing on the weekend. And as a whole family, your own little tartan army heading down south. And if you'd driven all that way to London, it mattered, and the focus was there.
Yeah. And did you feel that pressure growing up? I've heard you speak about how binary the time aspect is, which is, again, so simple within racing. It's, you make the time or you don't. What kind of pressure did you feel when the whole family was there and everyone's rooting for you and you've got a race? And how did you cope with that?
Well, I think pressure is when you feel you're not prepared or you feel you're slightly out of your depth. For me, if I feel I've prepared for something, I don't feel pressure. I might get nervous, but those little nerves are about focusing the mind. It's adrenaline in its extreme form, and adrenaline can make people do, extreme feats of strength or focus. So I felt a responsibility, but I felt a need. It's what I needed, it's what I wanted. And I would harangue my family to be in bed around 9 o'clock on an evening. Can you imagine? Surrounded by a group of adults and you're putting them all in their bed at 9 o'clock. I needed my sleep for racing. I needed to wake up feeling rested. And we were a one team. I just happened to be the driving element of that team. So, I don't know, it just all felt that we had our responsibilities and there was trust and we did what we were supposed to do. So... Yeah. The benefit of youth as well is you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know what could go wrong. You don't know how much it's really costing in terms of time and money. I see it with my son, we talk about testing Formula 4 and racing Formula 4. And you can see him trying to figure out when will the test be. And not one moment of his mind will think, right, where are the thousands of pounds that are going to be required? Where is that coming from? Because... like most kids, it comes from the bank of mum and dad.
Yeah, and it's so hard to grasp that concept of money and what it takes to earn it. And I don't know if that's something you get until you actually start working yourself. That's definitely something we're trying to instill in our own children, but it takes a lot of work. And I don't think I sort of learned to not be selfish until I had my own children. And then I understood. I said thank you to my parents a lot more for what they'd given us.
Yeah.
So I've read so much about you recently and heard you speak, which was fantastic. And you have had such a wide range of experiences and events in your life, like a spectrum that people will maybe never even get to in their lives. And that goes from a really tragic plane crash where sadly both pilots lost their lives, to high-speed crashes, to Grand Prix wins. The spectrum is absolutely huge. And I just wondered if you can give any colour around that and how those real life-changing events have impacted you and your overall approach to life.
Oh, I wish I could. I wish there was one sort of, one sort of sentence that would say, "Oh, it did this." I didn't know I was born. I didn't know I was born into a village in Scotland. I didn't. There's so many things you don't know when you're just making your way, and so everything that was presented to me was because it was there, and I understood, because of my mother and father's work ethic, that if I wanted something, I had to work for it. I had to do certain things to achieve that goal or that reward. So life actually has felt very straightforward in many ways. And the fact that I've ended up traveling the world for 30 years now on an annual world tour, I'm not even sure the Rolling Stones have done it consecutively 30 years. The fact that I've been so incredibly lucky to see many of the amazing, wonders of the world, and to have competed at high level in sport, and to have met royals and do all this. The bottom line is, when I go home at Christmas and I'm back in the village and I'm sitting having a cup of tea with my sister-in-law and my brother and my mum and dad, and we're reflecting on life, I'm as happy then, and I will be as happy in the future when I go to that, as I was when I was 12, 13 years old and I'd come in from badminton club or whatever it was. I've always been a thankful and happy person. So I don't feel that that journey has given me a better life. And again, my brother's a perfect example. He runs the family transport company, lives beside where he grew up. He's got his 3 kids, and my brother is happy and wonderfully so. So I think it goes to show you can come from the same area, do 2 completely different journeys of life, and at the end of it, if at your core you're satisfied, you will be a happy person. Some people are just not happy. No matter what they get or what they've worked for, they just don't seem happy, and you can't be someone else. I used to say to my sister, I can't feel what you feel and I can't see what you see, but I can tell you that I love you and you're always welcome anywhere that I'm going. But the one request is, from my side, we've got to move at the same pace, because if I feel I have to slow down to try and accommodate you, I'm going to be disappointed, frustrated, and I'm going to end up, we're going to have a discussion about it. But if we are shoulder to shoulder, moving forward, aiming for whatever it is I think I'm aiming for that day, we're a team. And, you'd rather be on a team than be an individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard before, and it's something that you're alluding to, that having that really strong family foundation and a great core unit is like this immovable golden egg inside you, so you can have all these life experiences and have really different lives to your siblings, but actually when you all come together, you are a solid family unit. And as you say, really happy. I think that those early days just are the foundation for everything, and I see that over and over again. I learn it more myself with me and my siblings. We all have really different lives. We're so happy and so connected, and I think that comes from that family unit early days.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And, why, therefore, do I not live up in Scotland in the village? Well, because my work is everywhere else. I don't have any work out there. So my work takes me all over, my production businesses and event companies and we're everything based in London, which is more accessible believe it or not, from the south of France on a flight than it is from up north where my family is. But but I don't know. I'm pretty happy with my lot. So I think that helps me have the energy to keep moving forward.
Yeah. So moving on more to motorsports, how did you manage the dynamic in motorsport when you are pursuing your own individual success, but also the team success? Like, that feels hard for me to get my head around. So I'm interested in your perspective on that.
I think a large part of my ability to deal with, let's say, that complicated challenge is the simple village boy mentality. What I didn't know didn't bother me, and I didn't stick my nose into things that I didn't need to know. I was very focused on what do I need to improve my performance? What are the tools at my disposal? Who's the race engineer? Who's the engine engineer? Who's the tire technician? What are the things that are part of a race car? Of course, I needed to know who the senior management was, because that's who you're dealing with. That's who you're negotiating with. But I didn't need to know how the front suspension was manufactured or the gearbox was put together. And I just never stuck my nose into business that was not my business, just for the sake of needing, the intellectual need to have more knowledge. And a bit like the engineer doesn't tell the driver how to drive, the driver doesn't tell the engineer how to engineer. And when that does happen, it's usually the beginning of a breakdown in relationship, because you don't go to the front of an aircraft when you're flying on your holidays and knock on the door and tell the pilot, I think you've taken the wrong routing, or what. Now, if you had deep concerns, you might do, but otherwise, you've just got to trust, haven't you? And a team is trusting people to do their job. If it turns out that they're not capable of doing their job, or they keep making the same mistakes, then the harsh reality is you wouldn't keep them on your football team. You wouldn't, let a goalkeeper who keeps diving the wrong way be in the team because he's a fan favourite. He'd be on the bench. And that in life and in business is the way I view things as well. In modern society, it's so difficult sometimes to extract somebody from a position because the system is so kind of supportive of that individual rather than supportive of the business as a whole. Do you understand what I'm alluding to in terms of in sports teams, no one's there that is not delivering. But in business, there's a lot of people in companies that are there who don't deliver. You can't get rid of them because they haven't actually done something that would be constitute, I forget the terminology, haven't had to do it, where you can remove them from their failure to remedy the fault, that you can fire them, basically. And I think we get so kind of bogged down in rules and regulations that just don't exist in sporting teams. Otherwise, these sports teams would never be the elite, high-performing industries they are.
Yeah, and I think business often looks to F1 as an example of high-performance team, but actually the same rules don't apply because you're not always with the elite. You've got the people that love what you do. Yeah. And in a company, you'll always have the people who are totally bought in, on the mission, will die for the company. There's then people in the middle who think, it's fine, it's here, we're getting there. And there's people just actively disengage and don't enjoy what is happening. And that just wouldn't be true in an F1 team. Like, you just wouldn't have that. It wouldn't be tolerated, whereas actually in business, that is understood, tolerated by pretty much every business on the planet, and still that becomes the norm. But still, we want the high performance team at F1 level, but the same rules definitely don't apply.
Yeah, I think especially in this modern society, it's all this sort of lifestyle. I can see a lifestyle digitally that I want, but I don't want to actually do the work. I just want it to be gifted to me. And I know there'll be those that would listen and go, yeah, but it's easy for you when it appears that you've lived through a growth period in your life and a successful period in your life. But I had all the tough times. I had a brilliant family, more love and more discipline than I could ever have needed. The discipline sign was like, sometimes you're like, bloody hell, mum's a bit angry. But then you a household, a husband, and 3 kids to bring up, as well as being part of a business. That would stress out any normal person. So when I look back at the journey, it was a fairly simple journey. A lot of sleeping on sofas and sharing houses with mechanics. And even when I arrived in Formula One, I was earning £5,000 a race, which is a huge amount of money to many people. But when you liken that to professional sport, do you think any player in the Premiership is earning £5,000 a race, per match? You're used to. But this was all part of. Did I want it? This was Sir Frank Williams, who went to St Joseph's College in Dumfries, although he was from up in Tyneside. He was canny, and he was gauging whether my commitment was about driving or whether my commitment was about the financial side.
Yeah, and also, of course it's easy to say when you've had decades of success now, but that was decades of consistency, hard work. There wasn't the rewards, dealing with the failures, coming back again. And actually, if you said to people, okay, yeah, you can have the success, but it's going to be in 20 years. Like, do you still want to do it every single day? You don't see those shortcuts, on social media. It's just the end product, but you don't say, like, now we're 13 years in business and it's been bloody hard along the way. But, and you've said to us, okay, you'll have this in 13 years. This is what you've got to go through. But we didn't think about it like that. We just did day in, day out, keep showing up, even when all the hard stuff happens. So I think social media has created a huge amount of unrealistic expectation on how long things actually take to get there. Yeah. And we want everything really, really fast, and we're disappointed when we don't get there. So, yeah, I think it's great to highlight the discipline and the long term that you need to get there. Yeah. So moving on to successes after all of those, that hard work, you won 13 Grand Prix, 62 podium finishes. Is there any of those that really stand out for you? And are there any behind the scenes stories you can share with us?
See, again, this is, I sometimes think I'm a typical doer Scott in that I've never really been good at holding on to amazing memories from the past and then bringing them to life and sharing with others. I think I kind of go, well, that happened on that day and it seems such a long time ago. But if I delve deep in my memory, because it's definitely nowhere near the forefront of my memory, then of course winning your first Grand Prix is something which is a realization. And if I watch a video of that, which occasionally will pop up online, I look pretty happy. I also look like a kid and I look pretty shy as well, which is all pretty much the case. I was quite naive when I was in my early 20s. I sort of became a bit more confident as I got older. And then the plane crash when I was 30 definitely was a sort of life-changing, who are you, what are you doing, what are your goals and that sort of thing. In terms of, I was not the best Grand Prix driver, but I was a hard worker, and that I think is what kept me in Formula One for quite a few years, because the team, they can feel that, they can sense it, they can tell when somebody cares, when somebody turns up with energy and passion and gets back up again off the ground when you got knocked down. So working with the team is the thing that I love most out of all of that, actually. I could say Magny Cours 2000, beating Michael, the race where I gave him the wanker sign and then gave him middle finger, was not my proudest.
Iconic.
Yeah, not my proudest. But it was what I felt at the time. I was pissed off. He was overly aggressive. He was good enough. He didn't need to drive like that. But it was in the same way that don't be surprised if the tiger bites you. Certain things, it's just their animal instinct, their animal makeup. So, beating him there was a huge sense of achievement. And I think on moments like that, I was world class, but there was the inconsistency to my performances, which didn't allow me to be at that level all the time. So, yeah, a hell of a journey. It takes me back to when I was a teenager. I wanted to race against foreigners. And by that, it meant I wanted to race outside of Scotland. I wanted to race outside of England. I was curious about Europeans and people, from other countries around the world. And in the end, it doesn't matter where we're from. If you've got a gift or a talent for a given sport, it doesn't need a voice, it doesn't need a language, it doesn't need a religion, it doesn't need anything. It just needs you doing what you do. And at the end, I've raced against foreigners from all over the world, and we can travel around a racetrack at over 200 miles an hour, and by the end of it, be separated by a few hundredths of a second, because it's just human endeavor. So sport, again, enables us to just embrace human talent and human differences in talent, and it doesn't involve politics and debating and, I don't like this because you said that, and all the things that hurt people's feelings. Getting kicked on the shins is a real reason to not like somebody on the football field, or in hockey. God, I only ever played hockey a couple of times at school, and against the girls' team, and they were brutal. So you learn very quickly to, what sport works for you.
Yeah, it's a great leveler, I think, sport. And like you say, I think so much of our division comes from not knowing each other, not taking the time to get to know each other. And actually, if you learn about people through sport first, you have a lot more patience for a deeper understanding and getting to know each other better. So moving on to business, you have since gone on to have a highly successful career in broadcasting and business, and created Whisper TV and Velocity Experience. What gap did you think these filled? And then what have you got out of being on the more creative side of sport?
Well, they simply are born out of the fact that when I retired in 2008, I'd already signed a contract with BBC, started working with BBC, who, clearly huge broadcasting corporation, and it felt to me they didn't have the same team effort. It had a bunch of talented people who came together to produce shows, and then they would leave again. I missed that team. I missed that debrief of how did we do, what can we do better, what where was I out of position, I couldn't hear the count. We've got to be better at that. If you come from a space of trying to achieve perfection, anything less than that feels like not really caring. And I care too much. So that grew into Sunil Patel, who was a producer at the BBC, Jake Humphrey, who was the presenter with me at BBC. They're both highly driven, highly talented individuals who had a similar understanding and belief about what a team is. And that's, ultimately how we all came together. Whisper was born, and it's filled exactly the area that we all envisaged, which is we are going to operate like a sports team, but we also happen to be a production business. And I think that work ethic, that vision, that all hands on deck, we don't have any of this, oh, that's not my job. Well, right now we don't have someone, and you can hold that or do that or whatever the role has to be. We just need people that want to be on the team. And, we have incredible diversity, inclusion, almost 50-50, men and women, all of the things that we believe in we're doing, rather than tokenism, which a lot of other companies, have a diversity and inclusion department, which is basically just to have a department. And the other thing, actually, I really admire success, and I really am respectful of the companies that have been there for many years before us. There's several fantastic production companies, much bigger, who do a great job that we compete with for certain contracts. And I will never lose my respect for what they've built, what they do, and never assume that we are better, because the judge of that ultimately is the result of your, not only the product you put out, but the people that want to stay with you longer term, and the people that want to come and join the team because they see something, they hear something. So that was where Whisper came from. And Velocity, my partner on that is Guy Horner, who is the brother of Christian Horner, actually. And I knew Christian since we were in karting, so long before Formula One. Guy I met, obviously, through Christian. and he already has a very successful business, a group of companies called TBA. And originally I was looking at a sort of subdivision of Whisper and doing Whisper events. But what became clear was that would have diluted where our core skills were. And in the end, partnered with Guy, creating Velocity, which was the vision to be motorsports focused and to target all of the great motorsports opportunities that are out there. And today we work with Formula One, Formula E, Extreme E, E1, a lot of electric series, actually, when I think about it. And they're no bearing on the event we do, and various other contracts and brands as well, like Patron, Puma, companies like that. And it's great. And it's really great to see how the team have built that, because in the end, I can have the idea and desire, but the team need to have the skills to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see business, I've heard you speak about maybe mistakes in sport are so defining, and actually in business or broadcasting, you get more of a chance to correct and to go again. Do you see business as more of an infinite game that you can keep on improving over a much longer period, or do you think you've just matured in your approach to mistakes and how you course correct these things?
I think I probably have a fairly young Scottish mind approach rather than some sort of big strategic approach. I just follow what feels right. And that's what I did when I was younger. I have adults around me to do the adult things. And I think that my role is to believe in what I feel and what I see. And again, as I said at the beginning, there's many different ways to do something right, but there's normally only one right. So if I can see people doing things wrong with no real chance of getting to right, that's just mindless waste of time, wasting everybody's energy. We've got to work as a team to find a solution. I have no problem somebody showing me a more efficient way to get to where it is we're trying to get to. And again, I have an open mind and trust in people to have experiences and knowledge that I don't have. But you've got to have a vision for what you're trying to do and a destination. So, and if you get there and find it wasn't quite enough, then no problem. Reset, get the GPS reset and get yourself to the destination.
Yeah, and I think that's how you have that long-term success. And you're right, it's optimizing the team for agency. Mistakes happen, okay, fine, as long as the same mistake doesn't keep happening, but empowering that team, especially when you have a substantial team, that's how you're going to actually get things done. So my last question is something that we ask all of our guests, and it is the one question that you wish more people would ask you, and what would your answer be? You have a very varied set of things people could ask you.
I think I've been asked so many questions in my life. Not being asked a question is quite a nice thing. Because I'm in that situation where, with a little bit of recognition from telly, sometimes people get nervous and embarrassed, and they in trying to just ask for what they want, they kind of make it awkward for themselves and for me. I'm very satisfied with where I am in life. I don't have this political need to want to rally troops. People that get me. The people I get them. I don't want to swim against the tide. I'm not going to fight with people to try and get where I think I can get with it, just avoiding them.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it doesn't answer your question at all. And I'm sure
ask you less questions is maybe what you need at this stage.
Well, I'm sure you've had lots of intellectuals giving you really, really important and meaningful answers. But I just think each day we need goals, don't we? We need goals. So if someone's on the team, people asking me, what's the goal, what's the target, then I'm quite happy with that, because then it shows they're already thinking. People who wait for you to, tell them, right, we're going to do this, but not being proactive.
Yeah.
You're going to have to ask me, that was a brilliant question. You're going to have to ask me a less brilliant question so I can at least answer it.
What is the one message you would put, if you could guarantee that everyone in the world was going to see this message and you could put it on a billboard and it's your one thing you want everyone to know, statement or quote or a philosophy you live your life by?
It would just be, one of the old tried and tested variations that I'm sure are in every country, but they'll do unto others as you would do unto yourself. I've said to my son since he was a wee boy, if he's polite and respectful, he will get almost everything he works for.
Yeah.
He'll not get everything, but he'll get almost everything that he works for. If you're a dick and you're rude and you're lazy, I don't get it. Why? What do people expect if you're all of those things? And I totally understand and know from working in media, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. There's a lot of people that don't warm to me, don't like me, probably hate me, and all of those good emotions that we can all have. But I genuinely come from a heartfelt family of, wanting to help others that are not so fortunate. Some people you just can't help because they're stubborn or whatever. And you've got to leave some people along the way, in business and in life, because they're going to bring you down. So, I'm not a holier than thou type. I'm not perfect, but I know what my job is, and I like being part of teams. And the teams I like being part of are the ones where the people have got a basic motivation to get up and be there ready to tackle the day. Yeah.
And being authentically yourself, I see that, how you come across and how you speak to people. And that is, I think, something that is to be really proud of, is that you're authentically yourself, true to yourself, and that radiates. And thank you for the time. It's been brilliant. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Tag Lab. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure that you subscribe by hitting follow on whatever podcast platform you listen to so you can get the latest episode. Thanks.